Hello students, my name is Mrs. Obasi, IP. I am going to be taking you on biology. Today, the topic we are going to discuss is genetics. When we are discussing this topic, we are going to remind ourselves of some basic terms that we've already discussed before. Okay? We'll look at definitions. We'll also look at the difference between RNA and DNA. And finally, we are also going to look at the structure of the DNA. Now, as we've already discussed before, which I'm still going to remind you again, I'm going to remind you of the definition of the chromosome, if you can remember vividly. The last time we discussed chromosome, we defined it as thread-like structures that are found inside the nucleus of a cell. And these thread-like structures bear hereditary units. Okay? Thread-like structures in the nucleus of a cell that bears hereditary units. Now, if we can take our minds back to the structure of a cell, we usually, when we are talking about the structure of the cell, we have a standard cell has a nucleus. Okay? This nucleus is what gives the command to the cell to carry out basic functions. Alright? Now, this nucleus has these thread-like structures that I just talked about, which are the chromosomes. Now, if we are discussing the DNA, we are talking about the chemical constituents of these chromosomes. Remember I told you that the chromosomes are thread-like structures that bear hereditary units. Now, when we are discussing DNA, we are talking about what is inside the chromosomes. We are talking about the chemical constituents of the chromosomes. Now, if you can also remember vividly, we talked about genes the last time we were in class. And we said that genes are units of hereditary. In other words, they carry hereditary characters from parents to offsprings. Okay? Now, what we are going to concentrate on now is, as we are going to discuss DNA as a chemical constituent of a chromosome, we are going to differentiate between DNA and RNA. Usually, the differences between DNA and RNA has always been an issue with students. They don't seem to remember. Now, it's important to remember that both the DNA and RNA contain sugar, forms of sugar. The DNA is called the deoxyribose. Okay? While the RNA is the ribose. Now, the DNA is a double molecule, of sugar. The DNA is a double molecule of sugar, while the RNA is a single molecule of sugar. First of all, I told you that the DNA is called the deoxyribose, and the RNA is the ribose. Then the second one I said there is the DNA is a double molecule of sugar, while the RNA is a single molecule of sugar. Now, the third thing I want to say now is that the deoxyribose is stable under alkaline condition. Alright? The deoxyribose is stable under alkaline condition. That is another difference. While the ribose is not stable under alkaline condition. Alright? Then the fourth thing I want to say now is that, which is something I'm going to come back to as we go further to discuss the structure of the DNA. Now, the DNA has some nitrogenous bases inside it. Okay? These nitrogenous bases are called the adenine. They are called the adenine, the thymine, the guanine, and the cytosine. Okay? They are called the adenine, the thymine, the guanine, and the cytosine. Now, in a standard DNA, you have these 4 chemical nitrogenous bases. But in a ribose, the difference is that in place of thymine in a ribose, we have what we call the uracil. Okay? The uracil is different what is the difference between the DNA and the RNA. In a DNA, you have these constituents, the thymine, the adenine, the thymine, the guanine, and the cytosine. But in a ribose, you have the uracil in place of the thymine. Okay? So I have mentioned 3 clear differences between the RNA and the DNA. Now, when we are talking about the DNA, as I said before, it is the chemical substance present in the nucleus of every cell. I've gone further to describe to you the presence of the nucleus, where you find the chromosomes, and in the chromosomes, if you can remember vividly, we have points we call the locus in a chromosome. It is at these points that we call the locus that we talk about the genes. Now, the genes are the units of hereditary. They are actually the ones that carry information from parents to offspring. Okay? Having discussed the position of the chromosome in the standard cell, and having also discussed where you find the DNA in the standard cell, and having told you now the difference between the RNA and DNA, I am sure that when I mention RNA or DNA, there will no longer be any form of confusion. The basic thing is to remember that this one contains 2 molecules of sugar and this one contains 1 molecule of sugar. And also to remember that the major constituent of the chromosome or the gene is the DNA, not the RNA. Okay? Now, I want us to quickly go to the structure of the DNA. The structure of the DNA. As I said before, and I'm repeating myself again, the DNA is the chemical substance present in the nucleus of every cell. It is responsible for writing the genetic information that is transferred from parents to offspring. Okay? Now, what we are going to discuss now is the structure of the DNA. When you are looking at the DNA generally, you will see it as inside the chromosome, we have 2 strands. Okay? Inside the chromosome. These 2 strands has 3 constituents. One is a phosphate group. The next one is the sugar, which is the deoxyribose. And the third one is the nitrogenous bases. Okay? Now, we already know what a sugar is and its functions. And as we go further, we are going to also discuss the ribose and what is involved and its function in the transfer of information from parents to offspring. Now, what we are going to concentrate on now is the nitrogenous bases, if we are going to discuss the structure of the DNA. Okay? In this nitrogenous bases, we have 2 bases we call the purine and the pyrimidine. We call them the purine and the pyrimidine. Under the purine, we have the bases adenine and the guanine. Under the purine, we have the bases adenine and the guanine. And under the pyrimidine, we have the bases cytosine and the thymine. So when you hear pyrimidine, what should come to your mind is that we are talking about the cytosine and the thymine. And when you hear purine, what should come to your mind is that we are talking about the adenine and the guanine. These are the nitrogenous bases. The adenine and guanine here are called the purine, while the cytosine and thiamine are called the pyrimidine. Okay? Now, I hope you have gotten this because I want to clean this. Now, when we are talking about a DNA, when you are looking at a DNA, when they are standardly looking at a DNA, we are going to see a helix structure, something like this. Okay? That's what you will see. Now, this helix structure, I already told you that the purine, what you see mostly when we are discussing the structure of the DNA are the nitrogenous bases that we discussed. Okay? Now, these nitrogenous bases bond with each other. Okay? When you're talking about the chemical constituents of the DNA, they bond with each other. Alright? Remember I told you that the purine, you have the adenine and the guanine, and the pyrimidine, you have the cytosine and the thiamine. Okay? Naturally, these are two strands, but we are discussing now that we are talking about two different strands on their own now. Okay? Now, these two different strands on their own, if this is the purine strand, you have the adenine here. Okay? And you have the guanine here. Now, if this is the pyrimidine strand, you have the cytosine and the thiamine. Alright? So, these are different strands that now came together to form a helix structure. What we are trying to say now, that in the bonding, the adenine usually bonds with the thiamine, okay? While the guanine usually bonds with the cytosine. The adenine usually bonds with the thiamine, while the guanine usually bonds with the cytosine. So when the structure, in the writing of the structure of the DNA, adenine permanently bonds with thiamine and guanine permanently bonds with cytosine. Now, the reason for this is that when we are talking about the structure of the DNA of any living organism, the important thing is that the DNA has a function. Okay? It has a role. The role is to maintain the structure of that organism and all the chemical constituents of that organism, so that is why you can have a child and the child will end up being like the parents. Alright? Now, if for any reason these structures are rewritten, okay? If for any reason these structures are written for one reason or the other, and another chemical constituent is introduced, alright? For one reason or the other, that is a situation in science that we usually call mutation. Alright? And when mutation comes in, it is an abrupt change in the chemical constituents of the living organism. And when mutation comes in, okay, at the end of the day, the offsprings of that particular species might not come out to be exactly what they are supposed to be. Alright? Now, apart from maintaining the transcribing hereditary characters from parents to offsprings, the DNA also has the function of keeping the number of chromosomes stable. Now, the number of chromosomes in man is 46. That's the diploid number. Okay? The haploid number is 23. Now, we're discussing diploid and haploid, which I've already discussed with you before, and we're just talking about it. We are talking about single and double. Now, if you're discussing DNA, remember we're talking about double strands together. And these double strands are, one strand is 23, one strand is 23, making it 46. Alright? But now, if the genetic constituent or the chemical constituent is changed, we might be having 23 and 22. Do you understand me? Or 23 and 20. At the end of the day, you are going to have offsprings that are not exactly the same thing with the parents. Okay? In this particular thing we are discussing, now when we say haploid number, what we are discussing is the number of a single strand. Okay? Now a single strand is 23. Now, the only place you talk about single strands or organisms that have, when you're talking about haploid number of organisms, you are talking about reproductive cells. Okay? During cell division, they are still single. They are the only ones in the body of living organisms that have a single strand of 23. Alright? Now, the autosomes or the somatic cells, which are the body cells, are the ones that bear 22. The reproductive cells bear 1. All right. After division, by the time the male and female gametes come together, this becomes 2. And during that mitosis, there is duplication of this single strand to give us this 22 plus 22. All right. This 22 plus 22 is 44. Plus these 2 of the somatic cells to give us 46. All right. So when we are discussing this, what we are trying to say is that we are trying to describe the structure of the DNA and the constituent of the DNA. It's very, very important. Adenine binds with thymine and guanine binds with cytosine. And it is 2 strands that come together to bind together. Now, another role of the DNA is that it controls the protein and enzyme synthesis. Okay? It controls the protein and enzyme synthesis. It's very, very important. We already know what enzymes are from our basic science background. And apart from basic science, even in biology, SS1, we discuss enzymes. They are those substances that speed up chemical reaction. Okay? And we know what the functions of proteins are. All right? These proteins have the functions of ensuring the proteins are amino acids. Okay? In the body of living. We know that what proteins are, the repairing worn out tissues, body building. That is the function of protein. Now, this DNA is responsible. They are the ones, when we say that the nucleus writes the information that is transcribed to the living organism, that is responsible for hereditary. Whatever the living organism is going to, get, or whatever the offspring is going to get from the parents. When you say that DNA writes it, what it means, in effect, it is that it is responsible for both the functions, the structures, and everything that concerns the organism. It is the nucleus. Then when we say that the nucleus is responsible, I've already told you that the nucleus, the chromosome is in the nucleus, and the gene is inside the chromosomes. Okay? Now, we are going to stop so far, and I want to give you people an assignment. Okay? I want to give you an assignment which you will go home and look at, and which will help you to remember these things that I've taught you. I'll write the assignments on the board. I said here, I gave assignments. The first one here is that you should define the following terms. You should define what a chromosome is. We should define a DNA, which I've already talked about here. Then give 2 differences between RNA and DNA. I think I gave you 4 differences, so you can give me 2 differences. Then the third one here is that you should draw and label fully the helix structure of a DNA. With what I was able to sketch on the board, you should be able to draw, and when you are drawing, you place the points of bonding. Okay? What bonds with the other. Thank you. By the time I come again, I will go further to describe the functions of RNA, how it sends information through the DNA in the cell, and how it helps in sending messages inside the cell, sending messages for protein synthesis and other things. Thank you so much